She was a woman who never liked to draw attention to herself. Even though she was married to a very successful man, her own heart always preferred simplicity. She never wore heavy jewelry or expensive clothes. Instead, she liked soft cotton dresses, plain sandals, and sometimes a scarf to cover her hair. Many people would not guess her true position in life if they met her on the street. She lived in a world where appearances meant everything to some people, but for her, comfort and kindness mattered more than gold and diamonds. That morning, she decided to visit the city for a little shopping. She had no plans to buy grand things for herself. She only wanted to look for a small gift for a friend's daughter who had recently graduated. She thought maybe a simple handbag or a scarf would be a good choice. Her husband, busy with meetings, had offered to send a driver, but she smiled and said she wanted to go by herself. She enjoyed the quiet moments when she could walk freely like any other woman, without security, without the feeling that people treated her differently because of who her husband was. The city was alive with the sound of traffic, people walking fast, and bright shop windows shining with displays. She walked slowly, enjoying the morning air. For her, the joy of life was not in expensive purchases but in small observations: the laugh of a child passing by with his mother, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery, the street vendor calling out to sell flowers. All these little things gave her more happiness than the thought of carrying a luxury bag. After walking for some time, her eyes fell on a boutique. The glass door had gold letters, and inside she could see beautiful dresses, shining handbags, and well-dressed staff moving around. She thought maybe she could find something small here for her friend's daughter. She did not feel nervous, because in her heart she believed a shop was for everyone, and kindness could be found anywhere. She pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. The moment she entered, the air felt different. The lights were bright, soft music played in the background, and the smell of expensive perfumes filled the room. She stood near the entrance for a moment, adjusting her scarf, before she began to look around. To her, everything looked grand, maybe even too grand, but she was curious to see what was there. On the other side of the boutique, two staff members noticed her. One of them, a young woman with sharp eyes, looked at her from head to toe. Her plain dress, her sandals, her simple scarf, none of it matched the usual customers they served. She whispered something to her colleague, who smiled in a way that was not friendly. They did not know who she was, and they did not care to ask. In their minds, a customer's value was judged by the brand of shoes, the shine of jewelry, and the weight of a handbag. The simple woman walked closer to a shelf where some handbags were displayed. She reached out to touch one, feeling the soft leather. She thought it was lovely, though the design was quite modern for her taste. She imagined how her friend's daughter might like it. Just as she lifted it slightly to see the price tag, one of the staff members walked quickly toward her. "Can I help you?" the young woman asked, her tone more sharp than polite. The simple woman smiled kindly. "I'm just looking, thank you." The staff member gave a tight smile but did not leave. She stood there, almost guarding the shelf, as if worried the visitor might damage something. The woman felt a little uneasy but continued to look at the items. She reminded herself not to let someone's behavior spoil her mood. She had come with a kind heart, and that was what mattered. As she moved toward another section of the boutique, she could feel the eyes of the staff following her. Another worker walked past her, pretending to arrange a display, but in truth, keeping watch. They whispered again, this time loud enough for her to hear. "Why do people like this come here? They can't afford anything," one of them murmured. Her ears caught the words, and her heart felt heavy. She had never liked the way people judged others so quickly. She was raised to believe that every human being deserves respect, whether rich or poor. She thought of her mother's words, "Clothes don't tell the worth of a person. It's the heart that matters." But standing there, hearing the whispers, she felt out of place. Still, she tried to continue. She picked up a small scarf with soft colors, thinking maybe this could be a nice gift. She held it in her hands and smiled to herself. But before she could even move toward the counter, the same staff member came again. "Excuse me," she said firmly, "these items are quite expensive. Maybe you would be more comfortable in another store down the street." The simple woman froze for a moment. She looked into the staff member's eyes and saw no kindness, only judgment. She wanted to ask, "Do you think I cannot afford this?" But her gentle nature held her back. She placed the scarf back carefully and nodded slightly. "Thank you," she whispered softly. With slow steps, she walked back toward the door. The staff did not even say goodbye. Instead, they turned to each other and exchanged smiles of satisfaction, as if they had done their duty. She stepped outside into the busy street again, the noise of the city wrapping around her like a blanket. But inside, she felt a small sting of pain. She did not cry, because she was strong. But she thought deeply as she walked toward a nearby bench to rest. She sat quietly, watching the people pass by. She wondered how many others had faced the same treatment in their lives. How many people had been judged by clothes, by shoes, by outward appearance. Perhaps many. And yet, those who judged often forgot that real worth was hidden, unseen by the eyes. As she sat there, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that her husband had always told her she was the most graceful person he knew, not because of her looks, but because of her heart. He admired her for staying humble, for never letting wealth change her. Remembering his words gave her some comfort. She looked up at the sky, a soft blue with a few clouds moving slowly. The pain in her heart began to settle. She thought of the scarf she had held. It was beautiful, yes, but perhaps not meant to be bought from a place that could not show kindness. She decided she would look for something else in another shop, maybe even buy from a small street seller, where things were sold with honesty and without pride. In that moment, she smiled again, though faintly. She reminded herself that life's true beauty was not in shining boutiques but in respect, warmth, and humanity. She had faced something unpleasant, but she also knew that the world had good hearts too. Her own husband was proof of that, and soon, he would come to pick her up. She did not yet know that the same boutique that had shown her the door would, within an hour, stand in silence when her husband's black SUV stopped at the entrance. But for now, she only sat quietly, her simple scarf blowing lightly in the wind, carrying in her heart the lesson that appearances deceive, but truth never hides. She sat quietly on the bench, her hands resting on her lap, her mind replaying the incident that had just happened. The boutique was only a few steps away, yet it felt like another world now. She could still hear the sharp voice of the staff member telling her to leave. She could still see the coldness in their eyes, the way they judged her without knowing who she was. It was not the first time she had experienced such a thing. Even though she had been married to her husband for many years, she had chosen to remain the same simple woman she had always been. And because of that, the world often treated her differently. She remembered her younger days before marriage, when she lived in a small neighborhood where no one had much money, but everyone had big hearts. People helped one another without asking anything in return. If someone's roof was leaking, neighbors came with hammers and nails. If someone was sick, another family brought food. No one cared about what clothes you wore or what brand your shoes were. In those days, kindness was the only luxury they had, and it was more valuable than gold. After marriage, life changed in many ways. She now lived in a big house, traveled in expensive cars, and could afford almost anything she wanted. But her heart never forgot those old days. She never lost the habit of wearing simple dresses and choosing comfort over style. Sometimes, when her husband suggested she buy expensive designer clothes, she would laugh softly and say, "I don't need them. I already have more than enough." He respected her choice, but the world outside did not. Every now and then, she noticed the way people looked at her. In restaurants, waiters sometimes placed the menu in her husband's hands, assuming she would not understand it. In jewelry shops, salespeople ignored her until they saw her husband beside her. She had learned to live with these small humiliations, but that did not make them less painful. The boutique incident had touched her heart in the same way. As she sat there thinking, she watched people passing by. Many were dressed in expensive clothes, carrying branded bags, wearing shiny watches. Some walked into the boutique she had just left. The staff greeted them warmly, smiling, offering drinks. She wondered if those same smiles could have been hers if only she had worn a different dress or carried a luxury handbag. The thought made her sigh. Her phone buzzed in her bag. It was a message from her husband, "Meeting will finish in an hour. I'll come to pick you up myself." She smiled at the message. No matter what the world thought of her, her husband always made her feel like the most valued person in the world. He never cared about how she dressed or what she wore. He loved her heart, her humility, her honesty. That thought gave her comfort again. But still, her mind could not let go of the scene inside the boutique. She asked herself quietly, why do people behave like this? Why can't they see the human being before the clothes? Why is respect given only to those who look rich? She wished she could teach those staff members a lesson, not by anger, but by showing them how wrong they were. She did not like revenge, but she believed strongly that people should understand the harm caused by quick judgments. She remembered another moment from her past, one that felt similar. Many years ago, she had gone into a jewelry shop to buy a gift for her sister. She wore a plain dress that day too. The shop owner barely looked at her. He showed her only the cheapest pieces and ignored her requests to see others. She had quietly left the shop and returned the next day with her husband. The same owner who had dismissed her suddenly became polite, bringing out his best collections. She remembered the look of shock on his face when her husband paid without even asking for a discount. That day, she had felt the same mixture of pain and irony that she felt now. Her life, she realized, was a constant reminder of how society treated people based on appearances. Sometimes it hurt her deeply, but sometimes she used those moments as a way to remain humble. She never wanted to become arrogant, because she had seen both sides of life: the simple world where love mattered, and the wealthy world where money often spoke louder than kindness. The sun was higher now, and the street grew busier. She decided to walk a little to clear her mind. She stood up from the bench and moved toward a row of smaller shops nearby. There were vendors selling scarves, handmade jewelry, and traditional clothes. The shopkeepers greeted her with genuine smiles, not because of her appearance, but because they treated every customer the same. She felt comfortable there. She touched a scarf made of soft fabric, and the seller explained how it was made by local women. She bought it without hesitation. It was simple, affordable, but it carried more value to her than the expensive items inside the boutique. As she carried the small bag in her hand, she felt proud of her choice. She knew her friend's daughter would love it, not because of its price, but because of the thought behind it. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts were not the most expensive ones. While walking back toward the bench, she thought about her husband again. She imagined how he would react if he knew what had happened inside the boutique. He was a calm man, but when it came to her dignity, he never stayed silent. He always told her, "You deserve respect from everyone, not because of who I am, but because of who you are." She wondered if she should tell him about today's incident. Part of her did not want to trouble him. Another part of her thought maybe he needed to know. The minutes passed slowly, and she waited for him. Around her, the city moved on, busy and loud. No one else knew what she had faced that morning. She carried the story quietly in her heart, like many times before. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way the staff had spoken to her, so openly, without hesitation, as if they were certain she did not belong. That boldness, that certainty of their judgment, stung her more than anything else. As she sat again, she noticed the boutique from a distance. Through the glass door, she could see other customers being treated with smiles. She thought, if only they knew. If only they knew who I was, would they behave differently? And if they did, wouldn't that prove my point? That their kindness is only for the rich. She shook her head slowly, wishing the world could be different. The hour passed quietly, filled with thoughts and memories. And then, she heard the sound of a familiar car approaching. A sleek black SUV rolled down the street, its polished surface shining under the sunlight. She knew that car very well. It was her husband's. At once, her heart felt lighter. She knew that the story of this morning was not over yet. Something was about to happen that would change the way the boutique staff remembered this day. She stood up gently, holding the small shopping bag in her hand, her scarf moving softly in the breeze. She did not walk toward the SUV yet. She waited for her husband to step out. And when he did, the world around her seemed to pause. The same people who had ignored her moments ago turned their heads to look. The black SUV had drawn their attention, but they did not yet know the truth that would soon unfold before their eyes. The black SUV came to a slow stop right in front of the boutique. Its shining surface reflected the street around it, and its presence alone was enough to make heads turn. People walking by slowed their steps. Some whispered to each other, recognizing the car. To many in the city, that vehicle was a symbol of power and wealth, belonging to a man known for his success in business and his reputation as a leader. But for her, it was simply her husband's car, the car that carried the man who was her partner, her protector, and her greatest source of comfort. The driver quickly stepped out and opened the door, but her husband waved his hand gently, preferring to step out on his own. He was a tall man with a strong presence, dressed in a suit that carried quiet authority. The moment he appeared, the atmosphere shifted. People who had not noticed her before suddenly paid attention. The staff inside the boutique looked out through the glass doors, their smiles frozen as they recognized him. He walked directly toward her, his face softening the moment he saw her standing there with the small shopping bag in her hand. His eyes carried warmth, and his steps quickened slightly as if he could sense something in her expression. She smiled faintly at him, the heaviness of the morning easing the moment he came near. "My love," he said softly, reaching her. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long." She shook her head. "Not at all. I was just sitting here." But he knew her well. He could see in her eyes that something had unsettled her. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Is everything all right?" She hesitated for a moment. She had thought earlier about whether to tell him. She did not want to trouble him or make the day heavy. But standing there, with the boutique in the background and the staff peering nervously through the glass, she felt it was important for him to know. She lowered her voice and said softly, "I went inside that boutique to look for a small gift. But they treated me as if I didn't belong. They asked me to leave." For a moment, his calm face grew still. His eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with a quiet seriousness. He looked past her shoulder at the boutique, then back at her. "They asked you to leave?" She nodded gently. "Yes. They judged me because of how I look. I didn't want to make a scene, so I left quietly." He took a slow breath, steadying himself. He was a man who rarely raised his voice, but when it came to her dignity, he never stayed silent. He held her hand warmly. "You should never be treated that way. Come with me." Before she could protest, he began walking toward the boutique, still holding her hand. She followed him quietly, her heart beating a little faster. She was not someone who liked confrontation, but she trusted his sense of justice. The glass doors opened automatically as they stepped inside. The soft music played, the perfume-filled air still heavy, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The staff who had once looked down on her now stood frozen, their smiles shaky, their eyes darting nervously. The manager, a man in his 40s with slick hair, hurried forward, forcing a wide smile. "Sir, welcome, welcome," he said quickly. "It's an honor to have you here." Her husband's eyes were calm but sharp. He looked around slowly, then turned his gaze on the staff who had spoken to his wife earlier. They lowered their eyes, unable to meet his. He spoke in a steady, clear voice that carried through the boutique. "My wife came here earlier. She wanted to buy something. Instead of being treated with respect, she was insulted. She was told to leave." The staff shifted uncomfortably, and the manager quickly shook his head. "Oh no, sir, I'm sure there must be some misunderstanding." Her husband raised a hand slightly, cutting him off. "There is no misunderstanding. I trust my wife more than anything. I know exactly what happened here." The room grew quiet. Customers who were browsing nearby paused, sensing something important. The staff looked down, their faces red with shame. He continued, his voice firm but controlled. "Do you know what your mistake is? You judged a person by their clothes. You thought her simple dress meant she had no worth. You forgot that true value is not carried in a handbag or a piece of jewelry, it is carried in the heart. And because of your arrogance, you disrespected the most important person in my life." His words echoed in the boutique. The simple woman stood beside him quietly, her eyes lowered, but her heart filled with emotion. She had not wanted to cause a scene, but hearing her husband speak for her gave her a deep sense of comfort. The manager swallowed nervously, his voice trembling. "Sir, we are deeply sorry. We made a terrible mistake." Her husband looked at the staff member who had spoken to his wife earlier. "You should remember this moment for the rest of your life. When you look at someone, do not judge them by their clothes or their money. You never know who they are, and more importantly, you never know what kind of heart they carry. Every person who walks through these doors deserves respect." The staff member nodded quickly, tears welling in her eyes. She had never been spoken to with such authority and truth. Her husband then turned to his wife gently, softening his tone. "Is there anything you still want from here? Anything that caught your eye?" She shook her head with a faint smile. "No, I already found what I was looking for outside. Something simple and beautiful." He smiled back at her, proud of her choice. Then he turned to the manager one last time. "You lost more than a customer today. You lost respect. And that is worth more than any sale you could ever make." With that, he held his wife's hand and guided her out of the boutique. The glass doors closed behind them, leaving the staff standing in silence, their hearts heavy with regret. The other customers whispered quietly, some nodding in agreement with his words. The boutique that had once been filled with arrogance was now filled with shame. As they stepped back into the sunlight, the simple woman looked up at her husband. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He smiled gently at her. "I had to. Not because of who I am, but because of who you are. You deserve respect everywhere you go. The world needs to be reminded of that." She felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had married not just a successful man, but a man with principles, a man who valued her humility more than wealth. Holding his hand, she realized once again why she loved him so deeply. They walked together toward the SUV, the city still buzzing around them. But for her, the noise faded into the background. What mattered most was the quiet strength of the man beside her, and the truth of his words that had left an unforgettable mark inside that boutique. She glanced back one last time. Through the glass, she saw the staff still standing silently, their proud faces now humbled. She hoped they would carry the lesson with them. Not for her sake alone, but for every simple person who might walk through those doors in the future. She turned back toward her husband and smiled. The day that had begun with humiliation was ending with dignity. And that was worth more than any gift she could have bought. The ride back home was quiet at first. She sat beside her husband in the black SUV, holding the small shopping bag with the scarf she had bought from the street vendor. Her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the city blur past, but her mind was still full of thoughts. Her husband glanced at her once in a while, his face calm but serious. He knew her well enough to sense that even though he had spoken up for her, the pain of the experience was still lingering in her heart. After a while, he reached for her hand. "You know," he said softly, "what happened today was not about you. It was about them. Their hearts are small, their vision is narrow. They only see clothes and money. They don't see people. That is their weakness, not yours." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and sadness. "I know," she whispered. "But sometimes, it hurts. Not for me alone. I think of others. How many people are treated like that every day? Not everyone has someone like you to stand beside them. Some leave quietly, carrying that pain with them." Her husband nodded slowly. "You're right. That's why it's important that they learned a lesson today. Maybe it will change them. Maybe next time they will treat a simple person with respect. If even one heart changes, then what you went through was not in vain." His words comforted her, but she still thought deeply. Life had given her many blessings, yet she knew blessings came with responsibility. She thought of her mother's teachings again, the idea that those who had more must always stand up for those who had less. She realized that perhaps this incident was not just about her but about something bigger. When they arrived home, the staff welcomed them warmly. Their house was large, but she always kept it simple inside, with cozy spaces and warm touches. She placed the small shopping bag on the table and removed the scarf she had bought. Holding it in her hands, she smiled softly. Her husband watched her with curiosity. "This is what you chose?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "It's not expensive, but it's made with love. I would rather give something made by honest hands than something sold with pride and arrogance." He admired her for that. She had the means to buy anything in the world, yet she always chose with her heart, never with her ego. That was one of the reasons he loved her so deeply. That evening, they sat together in the garden. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped softly as the day turned into night. She told him more about what had happened inside the boutique, every detail she had kept inside. He listened patiently, never interrupting, his hand resting gently over hers. When she finished, he said, "The truth is, you cannot change the whole world. But you can touch parts of it. You touched their hearts today, even if it didn't look like it. Your silence, your dignity, and the way you carried yourself spoke louder than anger could have. And when I spoke, it was not just me. It was the weight of your grace that gave strength to my words." She smiled faintly. "You always find a way to make me feel stronger." "Because you are strong," he replied firmly. "You are stronger than you think." The days that followed seemed ordinary, yet the memory of that incident stayed with her. She found herself thinking about respect, about humanity, about the way society often placed value in the wrong things. She wondered how she could use her life, her position, to make a difference in her own way. One afternoon, as she was sitting with a cup of tea, an idea came to her. She thought about creating something small but meaningful, a place where women, especially from humble backgrounds, could learn skills and earn a living without being judged for their appearance. She shared the idea with her husband, and he immediately supported her. "That's exactly the kind of thing the world needs," he said. "A place built on respect, not status." Together, they began working quietly on the project. She wanted it to be simple, not something that carried her name in bright lights. She wanted it to be about the people it would serve. In her heart, she felt that every small step toward kindness mattered. Meanwhile, word about the incident at the boutique spread in whispers around the city. Some people who had witnessed it shared the story. They spoke of how a woman, dressed simply, had been mistreated, only for the staff to discover she was the wife of a billionaire. They also spoke of the lesson her husband had delivered, and how it humbled the workers inside. The story carried a quiet power, reminding many that appearances could deceive. She did not seek this attention, nor did she want anyone to feel fear. All she hoped was that the story made people pause and think before judging others. And perhaps, somewhere in the city, another simple person would be treated with kindness because of it. One evening, as she was preparing dinner with the help of her household staff, one of the young helpers said softly, "Madam, I heard what happened at the boutique. People in the neighborhood are talking about it. Everyone says you showed so much patience, and sir spoke such wise words. We are proud of you." Her eyes softened with emotion. She never thought of herself as someone to be admired. She was just being true to her nature. But hearing those words, she realized that even silence and humility could leave an impact. That night, after dinner, she sat with her husband once again in the garden. The air was filled with the fragrance of jasmine. She leaned against him and said, "I keep thinking, everything happens for a reason. Maybe I was meant to go to that boutique. Maybe I was meant to feel that pain, so it could lead to something better." He wrapped his arm around her gently. "I believe that too. Sometimes life places us in difficult moments, not to break us, but to open a new path. Today, that path is in front of you. You're already turning something painful into something meaningful." She looked up at the stars, shining brightly above them. For the first time since the incident, her heart felt fully light. She realized that she was not just a simple woman anymore. She was a symbol of something deeper, proof that dignity does not come from wealth, but from grace. And she carried that truth with her, ready to share it with others. The world outside still judged by appearances, but within her heart, she knew she could make a difference, one step at a time. And with her husband beside her, every step felt stronger. Time passed, but the memory of that day at the boutique remained with her. It did not stay as a wound, it slowly turned into a lesson, something she carried in her heart as a reminder of the world she lived in and the role she wanted to play within it. She often thought about how quickly people judged others, how easily respect was given or taken away, all based on something as shallow as clothes or appearance. But she also thought about how one act of kindness, one gentle word, could heal far more than wealth ever could. Her life moved forward with quiet grace. She spent her mornings in simple routines, watering the flowers in her garden, preparing breakfast with the household staff, and reading books that spoke of life and human values. But now, her heart was focused on something bigger, the small project she had started with her husband's support. She wanted to create a place where women who came from modest families could learn skills like stitching, embroidery, or handicrafts. A place where they could earn with dignity, where no one laughed at their clothes or questioned their worth. She wanted every woman who stepped inside to feel respected, no matter how she looked. Her husband supported her completely. He helped arrange the funds, the space, and the people to run the program, but he insisted the heart of it belonged to her. "This is your dream," he told her. "I'm only here to hold it up." When the center finally opened, it was a humble building with light-filled rooms, sewing machines, colorful fabrics stacked neatly, and walls decorated with simple paintings. On the first day, a group of women walked in hesitantly, unsure if this place was really for them. She welcomed them warmly, her voice soft, her smile genuine. "You don't need to be anyone else here," she told them. "You are enough, just as you are. This place is for you, and it will grow because of you." The women slowly grew comfortable. Some of them shared their stories, how they had been rejected in shops, ignored in workplaces, or made to feel invisible because they did not wear expensive clothes. Hearing them, she realized that what had happened to her in the boutique was just one example of a pain many people carried. And that gave her even more strength to make her center a place of comfort and dignity. Weeks turned into months, and the center began to bloom. The women created beautiful scarves, dresses, and handbags. They sold them in local markets, and slowly, their work caught the attention of bigger stores that admired the handmade quality. Each piece they made carried not only skill but pride. For many of them, it was the first time they felt their hands and hearts were valued. She often sat with them, sewing or folding fabrics. Even though she could afford to simply oversee the project, she preferred to be part of it, to sit among them as an equal. They laughed together, shared meals, and sometimes even cried together when someone told a painful story. In those moments, she felt more at home than in any luxury boutique. Meanwhile, the story of the boutique incident still lived quietly in the city. People remembered it as a tale of humility, of how a woman dressed simply was disrespected, only for the truth of her life to be revealed in front of everyone. Some retold it as gossip, but others repeated it as a lesson, a reminder not to judge. And in a way, it became linked to the very project she was now running, as if one moment of pain had led to something beautiful. Her husband often teased her gently about how she had turned a painful day into a movement of kindness. "You always find gold in the dust," he would say with a smile. She would laugh softly and reply, "It wasn't me. It was life teaching me again." One evening, months later, she found herself walking past the same street where it had all happened. She was with her husband, and their car slowed near the boutique. She looked at it through the window. The golden letters on the glass still shone, the lights inside still glimmered. But for her, it no longer carried any weight. It was just another shop. Her husband noticed her looking. "Do you want to go in?" he asked. She shook her head gently, smiling. "No, I have no reason to. My heart has moved beyond it." He nodded, proud of her answer. She realized in that moment that she had grown stronger. The pain of that day had turned into something that could not hurt her anymore. She had learned to let go, not because she had forgotten, but because she had built something more meaningful in its place. Later that night, as she sat in her garden under the stars, she thought about how strange life was. Just 1 hour could change everything. 1 hour had taken her from humiliation to dignity, from silence to strength. And it was not the arrival of the black SUV that had given her worth, it was the reminder of who she already was, with or without wealth, with or without recognition. She thought of the women at her center, of the way their eyes lit up when they realized their work was valued. That light was worth more than any expensive jewel. It was the light of dignity. She also thought of her husband and the way he had stood beside her that day. His words in the boutique had been firm, but behind them was a love so deep it gave her courage. She knew that not everyone in the world was lucky enough to have such a partner. And that made her even more determined to spread the message of respect and kindness wherever she could. In the quiet of the night, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for her life, for her lessons, even for her pain. Because it was the pain that had guided her to discover her purpose. The next morning, she wore one of the scarves made at her center. It was simple, hand-stitched with bright threads, nothing a luxury boutique would ever display. But as she looked in the mirror, she felt more beautiful in it than in any designer piece. It carried love, effort, and honesty. And that was what true beauty meant to her. As she stepped out of her home, ready to visit the center again, she thought about the people she might meet on the way. Strangers, shopkeepers, passers-by, each one of them carrying their own story, their own battles. She promised herself silently that she would always greet them with respect, no matter who they were. Because she knew now more than ever how much a small gesture of kindness could mean. Her story was no longer just about being a simple woman in a boutique. It had become a story about dignity, humility, and love. A story that others could carry with them as a reminder to never judge, to never forget the value of respect. And so, as her life continued, she walked each day with quiet strength. She was still the same simple woman, but her simplicity was no weakness. It was her greatest power. She knew that appearances fade, wealth changes, but the heart remains. And it was the heart that made her who she truly was.